Welcome ladies and gents, Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter. Of course, you can subscribe to the channel. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk about Joyce and his fight coming up later today against Joseph Parker. I have just uploaded a video discussing the technical elements of Adonis Stevenson's victory over Robson Conceição. Shakur Stevenson's victory over Robson Conceição. Talk about a throwback there in Adonis Stevens. How is Adonis these days, by the way? Obviously, we know his career. I heard that he'd made some real progress with his health. Let me know if you guys have got any more information on that in the comments down below. But yeah, I uploaded a video discussing Shakur Stevenson's fantastic display against Robson Conceição. Really interesting technical affair early on. And Shakur made an adjustment that I felt that Robson was unable to adjust to in return. And he really should have adjusted. I don't know whether it was poor corner work or he didn't follow instruction. I don't know. But yeah, Robson really didn't change things up like he should have. So we talk about that in that video, as well as the future. We asked the question, what would Lomachenko have thought about that particular fight? Would Loma have looked at this and thought, yeah, these are areas I can exploit? Or would Shakur have looked at it and said, I know now I can take Lomachenko. There are certain areas here I can capitalize on. Check out the video and leave your comments down below and let me know what you think. With regards to this video, as you guys are aware, I always bring detailed technical breakdowns. I try to bring footage to show you guys exactly what it is I'm talking about. Unfortunately, this week, I just haven't had the time. I've been absolutely swamped with familial and professional commitments, so I've not been able to do anything like that. So I'm just going to have a little conversation and talk through a few things that I think could help decide this fight tonight. And hopefully it's a great fight, and it is a fight that I'm really looking forward to. Two heavyweights who are very likable in very similar ways, actually. They're quite similar in many regards. They're very softly spoken. It almost comes across as forced when they're trying to do the trash talking. How hilarious is it watching Joseph Parker calling people dossers? He just sounds like this guy who's, had no social skills, and Tyson Fury tried to take him under his wing and teach him how to be a more brash and confident character. It's like taking somebody who's an introvert and putting him with someone like Andrew Tate and saying, right, I want you guys to mix for the next month, 2 months, 3 months, and let's see what you end up being like. And he comes out, starts trash talking, calling himself a top G and asking what colour your Bugatti is. So it's one of those scenarios. They're very funny dynamic, I find that to be. Joyce as well, he always seems to go to the same sort of level of trash talking, whereby he puts on a high pitch and mocks what you were saying. Ooh, you're hard. He goes like the in-betweeners route. And for a man of his size, it just doesn't fit. You look at them both, two very big men. Joseph Parker is not massive in terms of height, but he's a very broad heavyweight. They're both broad guys. They're big dudes. And when you see them next to each other, then you can tell that they're both big guys, and they end up talking as though they're just, these introverted teenagers. I find it hilarious. Very likable guys, both of them, and very enjoyable styles when they're both at the races. Joyce will always bring an entertaining fight style because he gets hit a lot, because his hands are so slow. He's like one of those wind-up toys that you wind up and then they walk and play the little music as they're walking. But his feet are actually quite fast. They're incessant, in fact, is the pressure that he puts on you because of those fast feet. And he's got a very consistent, very thudding, heavy jab. And the jab is not slow. So he's got slow hands. The jab is not slow. Where he's slow is when he tries to load up either with a right hand that's down the pipe, but even then he almost places it from there and drops it down, or when he's particularly throwing a hook. They're really slow, his hooks. You can see him coming from a mile away. But when they're short shots and he's almost throwing them like a George Foreman-esque type uppercut, or when they're straight jabs, or even the right hand when he's chopping it down from the shoulder position, it's not the speed that he develops, but he understands hand positioning very well, and he's able to put his offense together well. He makes sure that his hands are often very close to your head, so there's not much of a distance to travel, and he's naturally heavy-handed. So he's very difficult to evade shots against. It's not, it's not a case of, he's just slow-handed. I'll just see everything coming and watch it whiz by. He's very clever at where he aims as well to land shots to the body. And with that incessant pressure with the feet, he will walk onto big shots, because what happens is as he walks you down, heavyweights start to feel pressured. They start to feel the sort of mental fatigue that Alexander Usyk can place guys under, where you're constantly feeling like you're in range against him and you've got to do something, you've got to react. And because there's this big juggernaut of a man coming, you end up throwing big shots, and you see a lot of these heavyweights really loading up. And because they're landing these big right hands, and they're heavyweights, they're used to knocking people out, regardless of what level they're at, they're heavyweights. They hit the heavy bag in a gym, and the whole gym's ceiling probably shakes. So they think to themselves, you know what? If I'm going to keep lining up these right hands, I'm going to take him out. Little do they know they're hitting a bowling ball of a head. And so he keeps coming. They end up wearing themselves down, additionally to them working hard. he's targeting the body, putting you under that incessant pressure, and then he tends to take you out down the line. Now, against Daniel Dubois, who's a much heavier-handed guy, he was a lot more active with the jab, and he was very active by leaning his body away to the side to evade what was coming back from Dubois. So he's not just, a Terminator stroke Frankenstein type of guy who's just going to keep walking onto shots until he wears you down. He's not a caveman. He's cultured at what he does. He just looks very robotic and quite slow. But when he needs to be evasive, he can. But even when he's evasive by his standards, he's still going to get hit with some shots because although he's agile, he lacks that athleticism, the speed really to avoid shots. Now, Joseph Parker, on the other hand, is the polar opposite in some regards. He too is very physically strong like Joe Joyce. I said this in the build-up to the Chisora fight, and a lot of people were questioning me, and then you started to see in the clinch exactly how physically strong he is. You don't have to be a big muscular man to be physically strong. He's strong in the clinch. He's also got a very good chin. He's been down against Chisora, but it was, he got back up quickly. He was down against Dillian Whyte. Again, he got back up on both occasions. Good powers of recovery, and generally speaking, he eats some big shots and he can recover. But the thing is with Joe Joyce, there are question marks about his psychology and his heart. If the going gets tough, how is he going to respond? Now, Andy Lee keeps talking about the fact that he's rejuvenated him mentally, emotionally. Well, that remains to be seen. But one of the good things that he has with regards to a Joe Joyce fight, from a stylistic perspective, is that he's very good at varying the type of power he puts on a jab and power shots. So he'll throw a bunch of light stuff and then follow it up with something big. So he might touch, and then whip something big. And so he varies it and you don't really know what's coming. Now, what Joe Joyce tends to do with that pressure, because he puts you under so much pressure, you're almost feeling like you need to work hard. If Joe Joyce is just getting touched by Joseph Parker, so he's literally going for walks and dancing around the ring and maintaining energy, if he's fast enough to evade Joe Joyce and just pour a jab out where you're landing, you've got to land something. It can't be the sort of jab that Hughie Fury was doing against Joseph Parker, where he's barely touching, he's hitting the gloves, he's not going through the target. You've got to put something on the jab. But if he's not having to load up these big powerful shots, he might be able to conserve energy. So that when it goes down the stretch, so clearly Joseph Parker's thinking about how am I going to clinch and have to survive and control the tempo at times in there when Joe wants to get close. So how he dictates that tempo and how he goes to work early on is key. He needs high levels of activity in my opinion, without too much investment in power. Keep a lot more in the gas tank as you go down the stretch. However, Andy Lee was talking about how Joseph Parker has all these various advantages. He's faster-handed, he's faster-footed, he's got the experience, he's been a world champion, he hits harder, and so on and so forth. And I'm listening to these things and I'm thinking, okay, I agree, he's got faster hands. Does he hit harder? Maybe when he really lets his hands go. He's got some heavy hands, Joe. We've spoken about that in the past. So is Joe Joyce. Different type of power. Joe Joyce is heavy-handed. Joseph Parker's snapping power. It's a different type of power. But there's one thing that I do wonder. Does he have faster feet than Joe Joyce? Because although Joe Joyce, like I said, he looks cumbersome, he closes the range quickly. And is he moving forward more slowly than Joe Parker moves backwards? Parker can also change direction well. So he'll be bouncing on the one side and he'll drop a shoulder and then quickly turn and move the other side, and that gets you to reset. If he's able to dictate the movement and get away in the way he did against Anthony Joshua, whereby he by and large stayed safe, although he wasn't doing enough work of his own offensively, then yeah, potentially he could cause some problems by landing shots at range and then going for a walk and conserving energy. However, if he's in a position where he's forced to work, and even Alexander Usyk in the Super Series in the amateurs was forced to work. I don't think Joe Joyce is as fast as he used to be back then. Maybe he's bigger and stronger now. A better fighter overall for sure, technically. But I don't think he was as athletic as he was back then. But if his feet are fast enough to put Joseph Parker under consistent pressure. And let's not forget that Joseph Parker against Andy Ruiz, who's very slow-footed, had a very close fight in New Zealand where Parker actually decided to box on the back foot. So if Andy Ruiz can close the range on Joseph Parker consistently, what's to make you think that maybe Joe Joyce can't? Yes, Ruiz has got the very fast hands, but Joe Joyce has got the faster feet. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops. So here's the thing. I believe that if Joseph Parker is smart, he will build up a lead early on. There'll be the consistent jab he's going to have to get past. It'll be interesting to see if he can't get past that jab early. If it's Joe Joyce winning the jab early on, Parker's in trouble. If Parker, though, is able, with a lot of feints, to lure in Joe Joyce, get him to turn and reset and then catch him with shots and then step out without him overloading on shots, just enough to snap the head back and win the rounds, to conserve the energy. If he's able to do that and get to the latter half of the fight, and he still has his energy conserved, and Joe Joyce needs a knockout, then instantly Parker becomes the favourite to me. Let's say he was to have built up a lead, for argument's sake, and Joe Joyce is seeking to come on strong. Well, the guy that's got an iron chin and can move around the ring, you'd have to fancy him to survive, particularly because Joe Joyce is the sort of guy who's heavy-handed and wears you down. It's not the sort of snapping power whereby if Joseph Parker isn't moving quite as sharply, he's going to get caught with something big like a Deontay Wilder right hand or an Anthony Joshua short uppercut that's going to change the course of the fight. You're talking about Joe Joyce having to land consistently, thudding shots that will break you down. And so as a result of that, if he's built up a lead and he's still got gas in the tank, you'd fancy him to be able to spoil and to move and to stay out of danger and potentially to survive a late onslaught. Now, needless to say, this is a Frank Warren show. That's another thing you're going to have to take into account. But if we leave that aside for the moment, if Joe Joyce is landing the jab consistently early on, because he does have the better jab, the faster jab, the more varied jab belongs to Joseph Parker. But Joe Joyce is a high-level amateur who has won tournaments and gotten himself to the highest level by pumping out that heavy jab. That's how he beat Daniel Dubois, who now has a version of the world title. Daniel Dubois is one of the best prospects in the sport of boxing. He lost to Joe Joyce predominantly because of that jab. So if he's winning the jabbing contest and Parker is unable to slip that jab and start to land shots of his own that don't have too much on them but enough to catch the eye early on to win the rounds, Parker is in serious trouble. Particularly if Joyce is also landing to the body and wearing him down. Because here's the other thing, if the going gets tough, does Parker have the mental fortitude to want to go to the dark places Joe Joyce will be willing to go to? When it gets tough, does Parker have the mental fortitude to want to go to the dark places Joe Joyce will be willing to go to? There's one thing that always stands out to me. When he had Dillian Whyte hurt in that final round, he knew he needed a knockout. And he was almost accepting of the fact that Dillian Whyte was holding on in that 12th round to survive. He almost accepted it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure he was tired, but he still seemed to have a little bit more energy than Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte could barely stand up, and he's doing his utmost to hold you. Just fight to get him off you, push him off, release your hands, just throw shoe shine stuff. At that point, Dillian Whyte couldn't defend himself. He would have been stopped on the ropes just by throwing punches that have nothing on them. He's just doing like short pad work. And he didn't do everything he could to free himself to let go of those shots. Does he have it in him? Do you believe, Andy Lee, that he's managed to find this fire within Joseph Parker and awaken it? It's possible. Hatman's always spoken, for instance, about Anthony Joshua and how he felt he was a much more fiery character when he used to mix with people from the street, people from his earlier days. Whereas when he linked up with Team GB, the more corporate setup, and Robert McCracken, Hatman felt that he lost his edge. Well, maybe the same sort of thing applies to Joseph Parker. Maybe by being in a spit and sawdust type gym, where he's with Tyson Fury, John Fury, Shane Fury, Andy Lee, who may be an intelligent guy and well-spoken, but he had a mean streak to him and he was a knockout puncher too. If these guys are putting it on him in the gym a little bit, he may be coming out of his comfort zone that he was in New Zealand all that time, and it might have instilled some sort of mean streak in him. But I'm also, when I say these things, I'm talking about intangibles we can't quite put our finger on. How do we know what he's going to be like psychologically and emotionally? How do we know what his gas tank's going to be like when we've seen him gas in the past when he's put on weight? Is he fitter now than he's been in the past? Who knows? There are intangibles here we don't know about. So here's my closing thoughts. If they're both at their absolute best tactically, if they get their tactics right, I think Joseph Parker should win the fight. Because I think what's going to happen is that he'll be able to outwork Joe Joyce without putting too much on the shots. And then when Joe Joyce starts to come on strong, there'll be enough in the gas tank for Parker to be able to survive if he's willing to go to that place mentally, emotionally, and if he's got enough in the gas tank. However, there are more ways that Joe Joyce can win the fight. I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Joyce wears him down and knocks him out late. I wouldn't be surprised if, because Parker's put on all this weight, he's not moving quite as fluidly as usual and it becomes more of a fight in the center of the ring. And although Joseph Parker will let go of his hands more quickly, Joe Joyce will be landing shots to the body, thudding shots, wearing him down and breaking him down. Joe Joyce is still yet to win a world title. Joseph Parker's felt like he's achieved a legacy. In the build-up to this fight, he said, "Have you ever been a world champion?" "No, you haven't." "So shut up then." "I have." Maybe he feels like he's achieved what he's had to achieve. So if it goes to the trenches, maybe Joe Joyce, who you know can go to dark places and has proven his psychology, maybe he's the one who's more willing and likely to get him in those middle rounds. Alternatively, I can also see a way in which his jab is just too consistent and too thudding. And again, Joseph Parker struggling to get past it. And he thinks, you know what, I'm going to back off, go into my shell and do what I did against Anthony Joshua. So if you're looking about probability of the various paths this fight can take, Joe Joyce is more likely to win the fight. But if you're talking about if they both get their tactics spot on and they're mentally in the right place and both performing and firing on all cylinders, I think Joseph Parker's got enough tools there to be able to see this out. And that's what makes this so interesting. So Parker points. Otherwise, if he doesn't get his tactics right, I think Joe Joyce can get him late or come on strong late to win the fight on points. Let me know what you think, ladies and gents, what your opinion is. I know I've sort of covered so many bases here, but I hope I've explained my reasoning quite clearly. Please don't forget to hit a stiff jab on the like button, a right cross on the subscribe button, and an uppercut on the notifications button. Thanks for watching. Chat to you soon. Take care. God bless.